Why I love Earthshock. Hello and welcome to this week's video. This week I want to talk about one of my favourite Doctor Who stories, the Peter Davison Cyberman classic Earthshock, and what it means to me and why I love it. It's absolutely one of my favourites. Now that's quite remarkable really, considering that, I have gone on record as saying that I'm not the biggest fan of the Peter Davison era. In fact, I did an entire video a few months ago asking, is the Davison era actually a bit crap? But Earthshock is one of the exceptions. It's one of those stories that just stands the test of time and is every bit as enjoyable as it ever was today as it was back in the day. Now, I think I watched Earthshock as a very little kid. I've said before, I saw quite a bit of the Davison era as a non-fan normie viewer way back in the day. Again, I only have very vague memories because I was very young. In terms of what I would call my proper first viewing, that was in the late 80s. That was 1988. I'd been a fan for less than 2 years. That year, I joined the Sci-Fi Club in my comprehensive school. And made some fan friends, one of whom was very well connected and had lots of pirate copies of things from satellite or overseas copies, some of which were better than others. And I got a bunch of stories from him, basically pre season 25. I got a bunch of pre-Sylvester stories from him, one from each Doctor. Though in case of Davison, I actually got two because he tagged Black Orchid onto the beginning because it fitted on a 3-hour tape to have both of them there. But the main one I wanted, obviously, was Earthshock because I knew about Earthshock. I was, I may not have been a fan for very long, but I'd read up, dude. I'd read up on the stuff, and I did, as I said, vaguely remember it from back in the day. And I watched Earthshock after Black Orchid, which I also thoroughly enjoyed. But Earthshock absolutely blew me away. Classic story, cracking story. It wasn't a very good copy, it had to be said. It was one of like fifth generation or possibly 50th generation copies of copies. But back in those days, we took what we could get, and we liked it. And I very much liked Earthshock. Now, I'm not sure. To say it wasn't a very good copy, it must have been very good enough because I had that copy for a really long time. I don't even remember buying the VHS of Earthshock when it was released. I mean, I've seen the cover on various things. But it was probably one of those things where I only had very limited money. And if there were two VHSs out and I could only afford one or as like a birthday present or a Christmas present or something like that, and the other one was something I hadn't seen, whereas Earthshock I've not only seen, I've got it. I was going to pick the one I hadn't seen, quite obviously. So I didn't actually get Earthshock. Now I can't remember. God, it shows you how long ago it is. I can't remember whether or not I taped another copy of Earthshock off of the ABC in the early 90s, because obviously they showed them in like 4 o'clock in the morning or something, the Davison era. I may have gotten another copy of Earthshock on that. I can't honestly remember. It's 30 years ago. Obviously, what I do remember is I got it on DVD. I did very much rush out and buy the DVDs when they were coming on. By that time, I was a rather more financially, capable of buying basically anything that came out that I wanted, as opposed to having to pick and choose. And obviously, I was going to get Earthshock, and I had that on DVD for a long time. I've still got it on DVD, and obviously, I picked up the season 19 Blu-ray. Actually, not obviously, because I was initially not going to get the Blu-ray sets. I didn't get season 12 at first. It took a long time for me to actually get that. I ended up getting the standard edition eventually. But I was initially kind of like, I ended up getting season 19 for like a Christmas present in like 2019, and I was so impressed by the picture quality that I was like, okay, I guess I'm buying the Blu-ray set. um, though I actually only just watched the Blu-ray of Earthshock for the first time a couple of months ago. It'll be a bit later by the time this video comes out because I'm recording it somewhat earlier than it'll be up. Looks great, and I have to say, Earthshock is one of those stories. There was maybe a time in the mid-90s when I perhaps overwatched it a little, and I had a little bit of fatigue. Then you kind of leave it for a bit longer the next time. But it's one of those stories that never really goes out of fashion and never really goes out of style. And the truth is, unless you've really overwatched it to death, which I try not to do with anything now, Earthshock is still as good as it ever was. Earthshock is so far, as of mid-June, it's the only story I've actually watched this year from any Doctor Who. I am actually considering watching another one tonight, but we'll see what happens. And I did try and watch Time Flight the week after. That didn't go well. But yeah, Earthshock, even in my current kind of Doctor Who fatigue, which is partly caused by the fact that I've seen the classics so many times, and by the fact that New Who is such a freaking joke and has just kind of made the whole thing a bit of a joke, really. I still absolutely loved and adored Earthshock. It's still a thrilling story. It's still an exciting story. It's one of Davison's best performances. It's got a great guest cast. James Warwick is great. I still think Beryl Reid is great. I still don't get what she was miscast. No, she wasn't. She's great. It needs a Sigourney Weaver. No, it doesn't. She's a fucking trucker. She's a kind of sharp-tongued old trucker. That's all she is, and she plays it very well. And it's like, what is the issue? I don't get it. She was an actress. Just because she'd become known as a more comedic, she'd done lots of serious roles, including fucking horror movies in her time. She was a fucking proper actress. What's the problem? And she delivers that role perfectly. I think Earthshock would be a lesser story without Beryl Reid in it, in my opinion. I don't get Doctor Who fans sometimes. But yeah, it's got some great cliffhangers, especially episode 1 and episode 3. Killer ending, literally. Earthshock is one of those stories that it's kind of almost cool to kind of leave out of your top 10 or your top 20 in favor of slightly more obscure choices. But the reality is, I think it belongs, in anyone's, if not top 10, certainly top 20. It's a great story. It's one of the, in my opinion, one of the few true classics from the Davison era that still stands up regardless of some of the inadequacies of the rest of the era. It's just great, full-blooded, classic Doctor Who, and that's why I love Earthshock.